Welcome to the Coach's Corner, optimizing training for basketball success, brought to you by 1080 Motion. I'm your host, Adam Rolfe, and I'm thrilled to have you guys with us. Today, we're highlighting the insights, experiences, and expertise of this panel. Specialists dedicated to developing basketball players. So let me introduce our panel here. Todd Wright, Assistant Coach and Vice President of Player Performance at LA Clippers. Adam Petway, Director of Biomechanics, Assistant Clinical Professor at the University of Louisville. Konstantinos Chatzichristos, Head of Performance, Fenerbahce Beko Istanbul, and National Team of Greece Men's Basketball, ESCCA Director. Thanks for the mouthful, buddy. Appreciate you. And then our lead panelist today will be Ola Eriksrud, our very own. He's an Associate Professor at Norwegian School of Sports Sciences. Gentlemen, great to see you. Thank you again for joining us. We're super excited to hear what you have. As we settle into our conversation, I want to remind our audience, I'll be taking questions on the Q&A and then inserting this into our conversation. We want this to be as interactive as possible, right? This is not a podcast. This is a live event. We like to just dig into the nitty gritty, so don't be shy. So Ola, I'm going to turn it over to you. Get the conversation going.
Thank you, Adam. No, I've been looking forward to this one. So it's going to be exciting to hear what the panelists have to say here. And looking forward to the discussions, really. And I want this to be freestyle, free flow. So without further ado, let's dig in a little bit, and let's start with something a little bit, broader, wider, and starting with a coaching focus or philosophy. Like, where do you come from? Like, what is your philosophy coming into coaching? So I don't know who wants to go first on this one. Do we have any volunteers?
We should go with seniority.
Seniority.
It's seniority.
Well, you know who's winning that one.
Yeah, I know. That's why I said it. I'm
right.
Sitting back listening.
Yeah, you're a good man. I think it's a great question, Ola. I think over the years, I'm in my 31st year right now, but to just give a small synopsis of the philosophy, it's really based on three-dimensional movement and trying to create the best movers possible within our programs. I think it's probably important that as a coach, you have some kind of a mission statement that defines how and why you would do things the way that you would do it. And, our training systems, we want them to be adaptable to the individual and the individual needs of the NBA player. And so we have to have a pretty detailed evaluation process to be able to examine what those individual needs could potentially be. But really the training, you have this large toolbox of strength training, speed, agility, mobility, prehab. I think you want to go in and use the tools that are necessary that provide those individual needs and demands of the game. But really you want to be able to restore, develop, and enhance the movement patterns to the NBA game. And in return, those skills hopefully allow your athletes to be available and sustainable for play no matter where they are in their NBA life cycle. And so I just think it's important that we have a large toolbox of tools to be able to handle, a 10-year vet that maybe's had 3 different surgeries versus a young kid that maybe hasn't had many injuries. I think, but the athlete's individual story is what dictates when you go into the toolbox, what tools do you pull out to be able to help that athlete get from where they are to where they want to be.
So based on the principle of seniority, and there were some principles here, Todd, that's great. We're gonna dig a little bit more at those. Kostas, I assume you are the next in the pecking order here.
Yeah, based on age and only that.
What is your philosophy, and it would be interesting to hear from you too, because it's Todd being in the NBA coming from, you know, NCAA, the collegiate circuit here, like how do you in your league, how is your philosophy? I know you're influenced and I got part of your training from over here, but what is your philosophy, your coaching philosophy?
Yeah, like you said, my initial contact with the field of strength and conditioning was in the States, and it was with Todd, and obviously heavily influenced, and I believe in getting on the right track right from the beginning in a lot of aspects, philosophy, treating people, apologize about that, treating people and things like that. But my philosophy is based, it couldn't be different. It's based on movement. We, if you, this is a popular term now, reverse engineer. What we're trying to do, we try to see what the demands are on the court, what we're trying to do with these athletes, and then try to understand what we can do to help them in the weight room or any other modalities that we might have. A couple of things that touch on what Todd said. I always try to answer 3 questions whenever I get an athlete, either for the first time or even if they're coming back for the second or third season, because every season the athlete might appear in a different state. Yes, we know their injury history or whatever, but there's a continuum, right? It's never what we've done before will work in the future. So 3 questions are who I have to train, and that falls on individual assessments and try to understand the person mainly, and that is a very a central feature in my philosophy is health. Are they healthy to perform what they're carrying from the past? And then all the other characteristics like age, limb proportions, and anything that has to do with the individual. The second one is, what is the goal? The goal in our field is to maximize performance, whatever that means, and then keep them healthy, keep them performing this brutal schedule that we have, like the NBA. We play about 90 games per season in various forms, different leagues and things like that. And the third is, again, what Todd touched, what are your tools? So what am I training? What do I want to do? And what do I know? And then you can plug in a lot of things, like on the last one, what do I need? Where do I need to get better? What else do I need to know? And who I need to work with? Because it's not a singular effort here of we'll hire the best, and this is prevalent in Europe. We'll hire the best strength coach and we're going to do great. It's not never about one person. And that touches on the final thing I want to say is complexity. It's that there's never one piece that is more important for each athlete, for all the athletes. It's an area of things that we need to understand and change. And this is the shift in my idea about training and about the human body and the process in general is we have to look at complexity. We have to see the whole process from a systemic approach. I'm not pretending to be an expert on that, but it definitely has shifted my focus from 1 or 2 things that are important to how do these pieces interact? What is more important for that particular person? And I'll close with that. In Europe, we have, obviously, it's like an ecosystem. All the ecosystems evolved separately wherever they were. Here in Europe, we have to do more with less. As you know, sometimes teams are lacking and professionals are lacking the resources, and we have to come up with ways to adapt to make things work in our limited environment. Some teams are better than others, but I think this is across the board a characteristic. So in a nutshell, this is how I approach things.
Good. All right. Adam, the second Adam. What are your thoughts? Anything to complement what these gentlemen?
Yeah. No, great question. And thanks for having me. I have so much admiration and respect for everyone on this call, and I've learned so much from all of you. So, I think, philosophically, where my passion currently lies is taking what I've learned from Todd and Kostas over the years, and as it relates to basketball specificity. And there's like so many good theories based on anecdotes and their experience and, everything they've learned through, 20, 30 plus years of coaching. And I want to kind of take that information and where my current passion lies is applying it as I transition into more of an academic role and setting is like, how can we really study this and research this to make it, not only standardized and repeatable, but taking the assessment out of the lab and into the field, right? So basketball is a very complex game, as Coach Kostas mentioned. And how can we study what the athletes are doing in their environment and kind of, as Coach has mentioned, reverse engineer that in a academic setting or in a research setting to really give coaches and practitioners a palatable information as it relates to how they can help their athletes, right? So that's kind of philosophically where my current passion lies. And I've coached my first job was at high school. I had the fortune of coaching in the NBA and everywhere in between, right? But currently, I just want to kind of drive the field of performance and basketball performance forward in a standardized, repeatable manner.
Cool. I hear reverse engineering, and I hear movement, and I hear specificity, and obviously all of those things are music to my ears on a personal level. So I think we all can agree that basketball extremely complex, like you said, Adam, in a very confined and constrained environment with a lot of action going on. And I think we can agree that multidirectional speed is of the essence in this game. So on that topic, when it comes to, and when I say multidirectional speed, you obviously got your vertical component, and then you got your horizontal component, your locomotive components. So if we're thinking about how do you guys target that, like a multi-directional, now I'm thinking more of the horizontal component, your locomotive patterns, your transitions between different type of locomotive patterns. Say you have a closeout to a side shuffle to power step, crossover steps. Like, how do you actually help prepare your players, athletes, when it comes to this? So a little bit more specific, if you will. Anyone up for grabs, or do I point fingers at this juncture?
Well, we can start, like, I can just briefly start the conversation, and then we can have it as a, like you said, as a conversation. I think this is a very fundamental quality and ability that the athletes must have in basketball is to start and stop, right? And as we see, the game is becoming very intense in this particular area. So half court play, a lot of curvilinear running, a lot of abrupt stopping, transitions from horizontal to vertical. So that is, to me, this is the most, obviously is the most challenging in the part of the game, and the part that really defines success sometimes. And we see the best performance and the best movers look very fluent, and they seem to be handling this very well. Others not so great, and we can start talking about larger bodies and centers versus guards, and all the differences that might exist in different in these different positions. I always start, and I'll start with this, and then maybe somebody can take over and can come back. The first thing that I'm preoccupied and worried about all the time, whenever we work with an athlete, is movement quality. Is before you even go to the quantitative part, and let's measure XYZ quality, and try to understand what's happening in terms of forces, is how well do you move. And what I mean by that is we have the qualitative and the quantitative part, right? So you want to first make sure that you apply those forces correctly into the ground. So we're talking about horizontal force. Are you pushing towards the right direction? Is your torso in the right position? So the first thing that I ever do, and this is true to the professional teams or the kids that I train, is we're teaching basic acceleration biomechanics, starting with acceleration, because it's a great It's a great opportunity to talk about body posture, to talk about knee drive, to talk about pushing and pulling, talk about applying forces into the ground, and then obviously reducing them, right? So we teach acceleration, we teach lateral movement, change of direction, crossover step, takeoff and landing. And these are the basic areas that we talk about, like slow 30-minute, one time theory, right? Because after that, when we go about training, we say, okay, keep your chest up or drive your knee or push back. The athlete understands why. And the biggest driver and the biggest motivator is the why. So we're starting with quality first before we start applying all these methods about, any type of methods that you want to start. So that will be my first step with any athlete.
Interesting. Could I follow up? Did I hear that correctly? Do you start with like a theory, like explaining the why to the players? You start with a 30, you start with a 30-minute there. Could you share a little bit to the audience? Because I think that might be different in certain environments for sure. Like, could you share like how you do that and how you're able to buy in from the, I know I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, but I found that very interesting.
Okay, so that's a good question because it's not the same with any type of athlete. So let me explain. So when I worked, I own my own facility for many years in Greece, and we train in the summers. We train a lot of athletes from many sports, kids, juniors, and any time of level. So at that time, we did have the time and we did have the structure. We said, okay, listen, we'll come in and the first, after the first assessment, basic stuff, it's a one-on-one explaining, teaching session. So we start talking about body posture. The basketball court is 28 meters in Europe, right? And we don't need maximum speed. We worry more about acceleration, lean towards the direction you're going, lift your knee up and push back. If you want to go horizontally, where do you need to push? Well, I need to push back. Well, okay, so most athletes are overreaching, so they're breaking themselves. So it starts like that, very practical. It's me explaining and them doing, and actually making sense of all the points that we want to make. The main thing is learn how to push against the ground, learn how to push hard and fast. Okay, if you want to be fast, this is the general idea. Starts making sense why I need my chest up when I'm squatting, why I need my chest up when I'm sprinting, show your numbers when you're sliding, and so on and so forth. So that will take about 20 to 30 minutes. In the meantime, I'm able to see how they move. So I'll tell them, hey, give me 3 shuffles to the right and 3 to the left. So I'll see how they move. Hey, give me a sprint from here to like 20 meters. I see how they accelerate. Some athletes are moving better than others. I have better technique and acceleration, some worse. In the pro level, we rarely have this chance, right? Because it's a different setting. It's usually the preseason. The athletes don't come in to be taught how to move. They're elite athletes. So in this case, we take advantage of the weight room during our warm-up, during some private, some one-on-one or small group sessions, and especially during rehabs, knock on wood. Unfortunately, we get a lot of those to start working on movement quality. So in the pro level, it's a little bit of a different approach because the athlete doesn't come to you to teach them how to move, right? So it's a completely different setting when somebody comes to train with you, okay? But in all cases, I try to find this opportunity to touch on certain key features of technique. I'm not a sprint coach by no means, but some basic things that apply to basketball, I think they're very important. That goes for deceleration, things like sit back, heel strike, keep your chest up, keep your shoulders on top of your knees, and things like that when changing direction, for example. So 2 different environments when teaching.
No, so you are in essence, no, that's awesome. That's one little follow-up before I let go of you, Kostas. You said elite and pro level. Do you also see like the need to educate even at this level, right? Because the assumption might be like, you come into a pro setting, these guys are elite movers. Do you still see the need to be working on some very basics in terms of movement?
Oh, absolutely. Obviously, some of the players are super efficient, they're talented, they're great compensators when, in our book, things are not proper, or you're reaching too far, or your posture is not right, but they're such great athletes and compensators where they're able to pull that off, okay? But there are many cases that small tweaks or small interventions can have a major impact. So there's a lot of leverage over there. And let me give you an example. I had over the years 7-footers coming and playing for us that have had problems hedging out and recovering. So whenever I hedge out, I can really recover to go back under the rim or go back in the heart of the key, whatever I need to be found, because I can recover from that slide. Where if you break down the movement and you talk about shin angles and you talk about how deep do you go and is your torso correct and are you using your hips to push against the ground and drive your knee to the opposite direction, and you see that they're all over the place. First of all, the majority of them have never heard anything resembling movement technique. Okay, so we don't teach that in team sports. If you were lucky enough to go to be in a track and field team, you probably heard about linear running quite a lot. But dynamically twisting your hips, driving your knee, pushing against the ground, first step after the crossover, push back, things like that can really help you move better and correct. And I'll take that back, not correct, improve that weakness. That might gain you some minutes and is a significant, let's say, presence on your team, because now the coach says, oh, look at this dude, man. He looks better on the hedge out, or he looks better on the closeouts. Oh, he doesn't look so slow in this first step. So that is a benefit. Our job is to maximize the physical capacity of the athletes so they can express the talents and coaches can use them. If we can just intervene a little bit, and I find a lot of leverage in that, in teaching movement.
No, that's awesome. That's great. Todd?
Well, part of the question, Ola, would you like me to jump on? Because we went to 2 questions, but which one would you like me to piggyback on?
Piggyback on the first one then, like multidirectional speed, because we got into the education component here a little bit, because I find that to be and explaining the why behind you doing things to create ownership and be an educator, right. And being a good educator and knowing your audience. I keep telling my kids this, that's a skill that is necessary in life. And if you're working with others, in team sports like basketball, it certainly is a very, very important skill set. So let's go all the way back to multi-directional speed and that part, Todd. How do you organize or structure that in your environment?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. I think Coach just dropped on a couple big words, right? We talked about the principles and how the principles would drive your strategies. And so when you look at the biological sciences to how the body moves, there's some commonalities in how the body moves, right? And how it authentically moves, using ground reaction forces, the mass momentum of your body, and the ability to overcome gravity. But the real important one is it's 3-dimensionally driven, right? Your body moves in 3 distinct movement planes. And according to what, when Kostas started talking about the specificity and the transferability to exercises to the court, I think that there was, for a while, if you look at our sport, it's very vector-based. Vector meaning I start in a stance and then I have to either move in a particular direction. I have to come out of my stance on a vector. And those vectors are 3-dimensionally driven. Either you can move the sagittal plane vector, the frontal plane vector, the transverse plane vector, according to the specificity of the movement pattern in the individual athlete position. And then the tactical demands and the technical demands to the game. And Kostas used a great example of the quick hedge, right? Like that little snap shuffle to be able to get out and deter the ball handler just for a second. And then the ability he used the word stop and start. Well, stop is just a simple way to say that you're decelerating, right? And how efficiently can you decelerate on that vector, on the specific demands to that movement pattern? And then the acceleration piece is how quickly can I get out of that deceleration, right? But I think it's important that your training system is principally driven from the specificity of the movement patterns, but the biological sciences to the human body, and how the chain reaction biomechanics in those specific movement patterns really change. And so you want to create some training systems that, you know, that work those specific movement patterns. And you want to go from being able to become strong in the movement pattern and moving across the spectrum into how I can create speed. And speed and power is relative to that athlete, where they are in their journey. But I think it's really important that, for example, a squat, you could create load and create force and get someone stronger, but can I move them across the spectrum that they jump, that squat turns into a jump, 2 feet to 2 feet, that has an air flight phase, now a directionality component, right? Can I go forward with that jump? Can I go lateral with that jump? And so creating systems that work, for another example, lunge. So I can lunge. Can I lunge with coordination, with load on a vector and come back? Can I decelerate as my foot hits the ground? Can I accelerate back out of that? And then building on that scope from the inside out, though, that lunge would turn into a leap, you know, where I would, you know, I could speed lunge on the vector, but at some point I'm going to move on that vector and both feet are going to be in the air at one point in time, which would be another whole plyometric based exercise instead of strength. And so you want to create systems, I think, that that mimic those vectors and the specificity to those movement patterns. And then you want to have a whole lot of tools and modalities to be able to build on, like you said, going from the strength and the intermediate movement skills to locomotor. So where locomotor we would define as going from A to B, whatever that distance is. And Kostas did a great job talking about the snap shuffle. Well, the snap shuffle might be 6 to 7 feet with a real tight, short, you know, quick, rapid response, where if I'm accelerating on the floor, I could accelerate for, you know, 20 yards, 15 yards before I'm changing the movement pattern. So just understanding, can your strength training systems give you the foundation of acceleration and deceleration on those vectors, and then build them into locomotor patterns?
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And then in terms of education, I think it's important to touch on that, because it's, Kostas, you touched on it a little bit. Like, it's, even if they're pro, there's a lot of things to be gained. Should we actually then start to maybe educate younger players to create ownership at a younger age, to empower them to know their own training process earlier?
Yeah, I mean, one of the quotes that stayed with me all my career is something that Mark Verstegen said back in the day when I was over there at Exos, was that education and motivation through education is how they used to motivate their pro athletes. So if you understand why you're doing things, then you most probably you get ownership, like you said, and you're more training will be much more effective, right? So I'll just give a very crude example that just happened today. We signed a player who has been with us for 20 days, and today was the first opportunity that we wanted to put him through a series of jumps in the force plates, right? On the force plates. So, you know, just counter movement jumps, single leg jumps, and a drop jump. It would take 5 minutes. He was so, and then I get the typical response. This guy is a very American player, veteran, 37 years old. Said, "Oh, you know, my jump is not good." You can tell that he was trying to avoid it. "Oh, my jump is not good." And then I said, "Listen, you know, the reason why we're doing it is because if something happens, not a knock on wood, we need to know where to bring you back to." Okay, that was like an oversimplification. Plus, we're going to be able to fine tune our training, which in season that's a little bit of a lie, not very possible. But he was in the weight room with his slippers. And I said, okay, you want after practice, put your shoes on. And he said, you know what? I'm going to put my shoes on right now. So he went in for, like, he didn't want to do it. We explained briefly why we want to do this, and he was immediately volunteering to participate. Same thing. If you understand why you're doing things, then you most probably going to do them. You're going to be consistent, and you're going to have internal motivation. You connect the dots. I'm doing this because it's going to help me there. Okay, so that's super powerful. The younger the athlete, obviously, the better that is, because they also get into this mindset of listening. Okay, so just listen and try to follow the coaches. The coaches are facilitators, right? They're going to try to get you where you want to go.
All right. No, I agree. I totally agree with that. And I've obviously watched some of you in action, and I see education as being a big piece of what you do. I'm Todd, how cognizant are you of your role as an educator? Like, do you like how do you view yourself on that education spectrum, especially when you're gonna, you have a vector-based system, right? Directionality.
When we onboard players, we'll have a small orientation presentation of PowerPoint. And that PowerPoint shows the mission statement to the training system and how we want to really look at them as individuals and the individual movement patterns. So we kind of define why the system's set up. And then we'll show them, though, some of the principles to the human body, right? How it's three-dimensionally driven, and we'll show them specific videos of, a player dribbling and stopping them into what we would call transformational zones, snapshots and pictures in time that would show an asymmetrical squat and show how they would be lunging on particular vectors. So we start to educate them on the vector-based system. And then we usually go into some of the other biological principles of Wolff's Law and how connective tissue is, remodeled along the lines of force that you, the coach, get to dictate, right? And the importance of creating a omnidirectional system to create and reinforce a robust fascial system through multidirectional training. And then we'll show that corollary law to Wolff's Law and how bone responds to multidirectional forces. So, we'll give them a simple initiation to the why, which I think is very important, like Coach just said. But the education piece is huge as a coach. It's if you understand why you're doing things, you are much more motivated to execute them at a particular intensity to help you move the needle. But I think the biggest thing in when we onboard guys is understanding the 3 planes of motion and coaching them on these are some of the words that you're going to hear, and see if we can get them to understand those things over time. So you give them some ownership in understanding of the training systems in their body and why they would develop it the way they develop it.
Oh, perfect. All right, Adam. How does this tie into what you have done? And also, you said something about, being in the academic setting. How does this echo with you from let's call it Kostas was talking about the qualitative assessment, and how does this echo with you? How you think moving forward, trying to, generate more info and a better understanding of the game of basketball?
Yeah, I certainly think, my needs analysis has evolved over the years, particularly as it relates to working with basketball athletes. And I have to credit Todd with that. I had the fortune to work for him for a year, and he was really the first performance coach that I had been exposed to that would watch game film, right? So just watch pick and roll situations, dribble handoff. What does the athlete look like in transition? So when you gather all this information, the athletes may not understand Newtonian physics or the kinematics involved with, their specific sport, but they are PhDs as it relates to the technical and tactical components as it relates to basketball, right? So one thing I think Todd and Kostas do a brilliant job of is relating it back. So, hey, this movement pattern, you'll be better in ball screen situations, which will get you more points per possession. Or, hey, when we have to hedge and recover, like we're looking at the least amount of points per possession. And if you could be in a good position, this will get you your next contract. You'll have, more minutes per game, et cetera, et cetera. So I think anytime you can kind of relate it back to the game of basketball when you're educating the athlete, that's really important. From me and my perspective, from a research perspective, and you look at multi-directional speed or multi-directional training, a lot of the gym-based research that we've done over the years is vertically oriented, right? So, counter movement jump on a force plate, velocity-based training with a barbell. I think kind of, most coaches have some sort of, needs analysis will do vertically, right? Whether, that's on a force platform, incremental load profiles. I think we need to kind of expand on that and how we're kind of viewing our assessment and our needs analysis to have a lateral component, to have a horizontal component, to have some sort of redistributing your center of mass as you kind of evaluate, how the athlete looks is, going into their penultimate. What do their joint sequence look like as they're decelerating? What is the trunk doing in relationship to the pelvis, the knee, and ankle, right? So I think all of these factors are at play just because, when you get directionally specific, just because you're good vertically, right, and can produce large magnitudes of vertical force, doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be good laterally or good horizontally, right? So I think it's almost like a perceptual grid that we need to kind of layer with our analysis as it relates to X, Y, and Z coordinates, right? So that's kind of where my thought process goes from a research lens, right? But I do think, and again, the guys on this call do a brilliant job of, is anytime you could relate something back to basketball, going back to the specificity of what you're doing, I think that creates so much more buy-in with the athletes.
Well said, man.
Yeah, no, that's well said. Yeah, because it's like it's like vertical is not necessarily the same as horizontal. Sometimes you have the elite movers, right? And they are just good vertical, lateral, and forward. But then you have the ones where you see there is definitely a directionality. And then sometimes in sports science, then you see, well, you have a good correlation here, or there's a correlation here. It doesn't mean that you automatically, just because your correlation is, let's say it's 0.6, right? And it could be like, okay, well, that's considered moderate, but let's say that. And that is between lateral and vertical. Well, if you do what's called a coefficient of determination, that means like how much of one quality explains the other quality. Then you square that value. So if we square 0.6, we get to 0.36, right? And that means that your performance in one direction explains 36% of the other direction. Then, in my humble opinion, there is a large percentage there that is not explained for. And that is something that I am very intrigued by and I'm very fascinated by, and be able to find those things and be able to then help and guide practitioners to, whoa, maybe we should target this. Maybe we should focus on this. And I totally agree with that. When you working with different coaches and also the players, you're explaining, like the coach comes over to you, it's like, whoa, he's looking better moving on the court when he's doing this now. Well, yeah, that's because we targeted such and such. So, no, that was my little one on that multi-directional.
But it's important to understand also, because technology comes into play here, because all these years, throughout the years, we've been testing what we were able to test. Okay, so it used to be we all remember that we were big on VO2 max and things that were housed in the lab, and there was no possibility in really doing any field work for the applied practitioners that work with the athletes and had questions. So it was the VO2 max, then there was this cumbersome big plates that you needed a lap to use for the force plates, and there was just there were no means to test anything. Well, the last 15 years, with the explosion of technology and micro technology and wearables and all this, all of a sudden we got an influx of data and capabilities to measure a whole bunch of stuff. Some of that with some validity, some without validity, and just it's a little bit chaotic out there. But I think that now we have the tools to really look at these problems and ask the questions, because before I don't think we had the tools. So we just relied on the coaching expertise and the eye and all that. Now we can measure even with a simple iPhone. So now we need to sit down and say, okay, what is important, what is measurable, and like you alluded, what does it mean?
Yeah.
What is determination, correlation, all that. So I think technology is huge on that, and the biggest challenge will be to unify everything in under one idea as to what does this mean in movement, what does it mean in performance. There's a whole bunch of different things that we try to look at, details like the different parts of the slopes and everything. So I think that's the next challenge.
Yeah, it is a challenge, and I agree with you. Just because you can measure it doesn't make it meaningful or valuable, right? To be, coming from a scientist to that's a little awful to say almost, but it's also true. But I think it goes back to that reverse engineering, and you have to like really understand what basketball is and understand that, well, and that's working in collaboration with practitioners. So I think in my humble opinion, the best questions have always been in interaction with the practitioners, not because of reading 50 papers necessarily. That gives
sorry to intervene again, but a lot of people ask, hey, what are you testing preseason? I always answer, what do you want to know? You can test whatever you want. Yeah. What do you want to know? What is important for you?
What do you value?
So, yeah.
Right. What do you value? I think that Adam brought up a great point, though, is that how we've evolved, the traditional research that's come through has been very vertically based, right? The force plate data is very vertically based, and it's good. But you have to understand there's a lot of different force signatures in the game. And Adam, brought up, the ability to train and measure on those things. And that's where 1080 is ahead of the curve. It's ahead of the curve because it can test deceleration and acceleration on multiple vectors. And we have multiple athletes that on single leg counter movement jumps that have significant asymmetries, or that, between right and left leg, and you put them into a lateral, test on the 1080, and they're better than they are on their left leg, moving left lateral, and so I think it's important that your system does somehow be able to measure, and so you can have great dialogue on, those specific movement signatures in creating systems that allow you to improve those. So, the vertical force, the linear acceleration, the lateral acceleration, and the multidirectional acceleration are the four big ones that I see in our game. But they can be very different. Just because one movement pattern says I'm good, chain reaction biomechanics change when you're on those vectors, and some athletes are really good enough to be better at that specific movement pattern on their right leg, more lateral than it is vertical.
How are we looking for time, Adam? We're approaching 45 here.
Yes, we have about 15 minutes left.
All right.
One question that came up from the group here listening, and Costa, you kind of spoke about this with change of direction, but in bigger team settings, are there any specific drills you do for torso angle and shin angle for change of direction? Like, is there any advice you can give of simple drills that you're doing a bigger group instead of like a small one-on-one situation?
Well, yeah, a bigger group would be the assortment of of
You
individuals,
definitely.
right? So
Yeah, I'm thinking like,
so you have to really explain. So I always start with simple drills, and I'm a big fan of that. We usually tend to train basic, simple drills, basic mechanics on our, on our workouts, and then allow the complexity to take care of itself on the basketball court. Obviously, you can only mimic that in any kind of. Actually, you can a little bit, but we want to focus on the main stuff. Changes of direction with cones, simple drills. The key here is not the drill. The key is to coach. The key is to teach, identify the individual characteristics of the athletes in this group, and then coach the big ones. So obviously, if you get a group, especially for young athletes, because I know the majority of the audience is not dealing with the professional athletes, right? So we're dealing with some kind of other level or juniors or whatever. So identify, the big virus first. Where do I get the biggest leverage? You talked about shin angles. Well, try to get yourself low. Try to turn your torso in a certain way and teach. I know it's hard to explain, what exactly the athlete needs to do, but do coach. That's the biggest for me. We start our training sessions with simple changes of direction. So I put the cones for a pattern for changing directions. And the first one is stop before the cone, plant your leg, lean, rotate, plant, rotate, head to the direction you want to head with your hips. The hips are the steering wheel of your body. And then the next drill is going to be curled around. So make sure you learn how to decelerate, how you're going to lower your center of mass, and then reaccelerate. So just coach. That's my biggest thing, and it's not really that complicated. Same in the weight room. You don't have to do crazy stuff. Just pick what's important and make sure that it's executed perfectly. So that's my let's say my advice. And if you talk about shin angles, things like lateral. If we talk about lateral movement, which is shin angles are extremely important. Lateral bounds with holds, lateral bounds continues, over hurdle drills, learn how to stop by, having this positive shin angle, and so on and so forth. That'll be it.
Thank you.
Anyone else want to chime in on that one, or?
Questions about drills that you can do with groups for change of direction?
Was it that? Was that? Yep.
Yeah. So taking it to you can't put a 1080 necessarily on 10 people at one time, but if you're in a group, just education, just from that point of like being coach, and if you have 5 people in front of you, just going through those fundamentals that Costa was talking about. And I really like what you said, steering wheel of the hips, like teaching them like what you want to see as a coach to turn in different directions. And then maybe that's applying a 1080 or a band or some type of resistance to get tactile feedback, right? But you're setting the stage without anything.
I think of 2 different environments. One's the training environment, and then one is as you move onto the floor and practice. So there were many years that, when we were at the University of Texas, that every day we would start with a 3-line closeout. And like to Kostas's point, you're coaching body position to start, right? And so what does your stance look like? And I think the players that have great reactability, they find a way to be able to sit in their stance. So we would use the analogy that the engine kind of stays on, right? And so as I'm in my stance, I have some kind of eccentric lobe. My nervous system is kind of turned on, that when I do see something, I can react. Where a lot of players go up and down the floor, get tired, and they stand and they turn the engine off. Now you have to turn the car back on as your stance drops back down. But starting position, what do you look like coming out of that stance? What does the first 2 steps look like? The attack angles of your shins and your torso. How are you using your arms to accelerate to the ball? And then as you get to the ball, in college, there's a lot of what we would call the chop stop, where you'd 1, 2, and your feet would start to chop on the ground into a rapid response. Therefore, if someone put the ball on the ground, your feet are in contact with the ground, that you could absorb and go back in a different direction. Where at the professional level, the constraints of the game, the 3-point line is bigger. and there are better skilled players that can make shots. And so at this level, there isn't really a chop stop. It's a sprint stop. And so you're accelerating, you're going to try to get to that player as quick as they can so they can't just comfortably get their shot off, because the skill levels changed. And so there's some specificities that would change according to college and in the professional level. But to go back to Kostas's point, if you're in the room, there's fundamental principles to deceleration exercises, right? Lowering your center of gravity, your shin angles, your posture angles, teaching about those things. And as your body moves in space, can you bring that engine back down so the ankle, the knee, and the hip can absorb that force with stability in a particular transformational zone to be able to load and explode back out. So two different environments, one in the training environment where you can use the 1080 as external load to enhance those movement patterns and deceleration patterns. But then crossing over where Adam's done such a great job of and Kostas both, that there's a commonality between the three of us on the calls, that I think that we all love the game of basketball. And so bringing it from the training across a small spectrum into game-like environments is very important, and things that we all value as coaches.
Adam,
Can I
anything
just
to add
pick
to
up
that?
just a really quick point of what Todd said about the chopping action and stopping and closeouts. Europe is a little bit in between because our 3-point line is closer, and also the court is a little bit smaller in Europe. But I would just besides the closeout, I always teach two ways of decelerating. One is with this stopping after a sprint with heels first, just kind of decelerate and then do a flyby, or even come to a complete stop, or the chopping action. The chopping action can be used in offense as well. So you're running towards the screen, you have to, go almost full speed, then hesitate. So you have to decrease your speed in a very, very short space, and then reaccelerate. So we still teach that as a fundamental movement, so players can have it in their repertoire, even though it's not, directly geared towards being a better closeout player. Although in Europe, I have to say that we do have that the smaller gym, the smaller distances, and we do use the chops a little bit more. But it's going to be more on offensive. Building fundamental skills, tools that can be used, I think, is important.
Adam, anything to add to that?
Yeah.
A lot of wisdom in those two, so I don't know how much more you can.
No, I think they covered it great. I'd say just have a robust toolbox, and as a coach, kind of understand the context and the environment of the technical and tactical domains of the game, right? So it's like, hey, what angle should I take in a dribble handoff for this specific player? Or like when I do decelerate, what does my foot pattern, stride length, frequency, contact times typically look like? And that will kind of help you and kind of guide you what you want to do in a controlled environment. I think obviously training age, body type, positional demands, body mass, lever length, all of those play into the different types of strategies that athletes will use to decelerate, laterally shuffle, accelerate, decelerate, and transition. But I think understanding the context of the game will kind of dictate your coaching strategies relative to that individual.
Good.
That's good.
Adam, do you have any other questions? If not, I have one last question, because I think we have to start to think about rounding this.
Yeah, we're about the last 5 minutes. The one question I can ask here, and it's bringing a question on the T-step, but for your guys' positions, working with the skill coach or the head coach of the team, at the levels that you're at, how often do they ever say, I need to see a fundamental movement like X, like a T-step? It has to be the T-step off a hedge or something. Or do you have freedom to guide that? Like, because I think, Todd, that was to your point, like you're watching game plan, you're watching guys how they're moving, but how do you guys sync that to make it all work together as a team of coaches, a team of players, to really be all on the same page?
Well, I think you got to learn what your coach values. right? And I've worked for, 3 or 4 different ones, and each one of them values, things a little differently. In college, I knew that my coach really valued defense, and so a lot of our drills were very defense specific, and we drilled those things 12 months a year. And when we were at the University of Texas, we had some great defensive teams, and so I think you just got to learn what your coach really values. Does he want to get out and run and score in the first 3 seconds? So maybe you're stressing linear acceleration out of multiple, starts, right? How you get out and go and accelerate. But I've been lucky to, be able to be in with a lot of coaches and be behind closed doors to be able to learn what they want. And so there's a relationship that I think has to be established. But as a coach, you should go to your coach and ask him what he values. Like on defense, what do you really value? On offense, what do you really value? And because our jobs are to serve our head coaches in our programs and make them the best players that they can be according to how they see the world.
That was well said.
Well said.
Very well said.
Do you guys use motion capture at all? Markerless, marker-based, that was a question we had. And that could be a real quick answer, yes, no. Is that something you have as part of your toolbox?
We're exploring it. And so it's in the early stages, and I know that technology is moving very fast. I think Adam's going to be a great one for this, and I'm sure Kostas has done some stuff with it too, but I'm sure it's going to revolutionize how we look at biomechanics here in the future.
Yes, to answer your question, we have both marker-based and markerless motion capture systems. I think as Todd mentioned, and as like the impetus behind all of these technological advances is kind of getting the athlete out of the lab or your assessment out of the lab and into the field. So we've actually looked at a couple of different computer vision technologies and even some 240 hertz on an iPhone that we could take up that's portable, take it out to the track, take it out to the pitch, take it on the court, and just assess all of these different movement patterns. It's not where I think it will be in next year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, but it is very, I guess, ecologically valid and moving towards more of like a field-based assessment. Sports like track and field and baseball, where the X and Y coordinates are fixed, are kind of blazing the trail, right? So you start 100 meters at the blocks and you finish at the finish line, right? Or it's like, at a pitching mound, like you're always going to start and finish in the same location, right? So because there's no occlusion to the cameras and they're starting in a fixed location, you can, get all the kinematic features of, a pitcher, elbow velocity and exit velocity as they pitch a baseball, or the trunk rotation of a batter, as they, make contact in the exit velocity of the ball. Using inverse dynamics, you could get ground reaction forces. So you're getting really an in situ evaluation of what's occurring during games, right? In most team sports, we're not there yet, but I do think in the near future, we're going to start getting a lot of, markerless motion capture and computer vision to where we can start capturing some of these in-game moments for the assessment, right?
If I may chime in on that one, Adam, yeah, even if it's not in-game, you could have I think the Pocket Lab will be more and more readily available.
Sure.
With moving forward, in that mocap will be more and more available to use it faster in the gym or on the practice court or what have you, where you can actually get some data without it taking too long time, because we know time is of the essence, and setting up equipment for a long period of time and just wait 45 minutes, we're going to put these markers on you. That's, these things are hurdles. So we, and by that also, like, can we get data that are meaningful, going back to Kostas here? Can we get data that are actually meaningful and reliable and valid, and that we can use and that is relevant to the game of basketball? from that. So I think the future is very, very interesting when it comes to this, to be honest.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, we have used periodically. We don't use it systematically. It's one of those things that I mentioned in the beginning. We had some companies trying to work with us the last 3 years. We had 2 different companies trying to display what they're doing and kind of have some pilot testing, but nothing very systematic. Most of the systems that I saw, for example, one of them didn't include the ankle joint in the analysis, so that threw off everything. And obviously, I'm not the expert to talk about that because I don't have a lot of experience, but we did try to explore solutions, with motion capture, but nothing too systematic where I can say, well, I have an opinion on that.
No, and I think this is where, and this also goes back to the multidisciplinary team, right? Where you will have
Obviously.
people that have that understanding or competency, being able to translate and understand the applied setting, the rehab domain, the strength and conditioning, performance domain, and also on top of that, understand the game. People with that understanding and technologically savvy, I think could be a valuable asset to the performance team or the overall supporting cast around, around
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We get now, I think all the coaching staffs and the medical teams are comprised increasingly from people from completely different backgrounds. Computer scientists is one, mathematicians, and people that a few years back had no place in our profession. You remember when they start being included, traditional coaches were kind of skeptical. I don't need the numbers, and what do you know about sports? But we need that multidisciplinary approach, and we need to step back and be experts on our narrow field, and then understand the rest.
All right, gents. I think I had a whole bunch of other questions for you as well, but I think we'll have to save them for another time. Speaking of another time, Adam.
Guys, awesome job today. Worldwide audience, which I loved. A lot of questions that came all over the world, which is fantastic. Just shows the global impact basketball has, right? Give these guys a shout out on social media. They had many pearls that I think are going to move the direction of coaching in basketball a lot further to advance. So thank you guys for sharing so much. We will talk to you all later. You guys have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.